Welcome to the Feminine in Gnosticism. This is episode 2, Protennoia, the voice of first thought. In the first episode of this series, we began at the highest level of Gnostic cosmology with Barbelo, the first thought and the divine fullness from which all other realities unfold. Barbelo represents the original wholeness of the Pleroma, the realm of divine completeness that exists beyond the confusion of the material world. In this episode, we move one step down, not into error or corruption, but into expression. Here we meet Protennoia, whose name means first thought. Protennoia is closely associated with Barbelo, and in some texts she is understood as Barbelo in action, Barbelo speaking, or Barbelo revealing herself. If Barbelo is the fullness of divine awareness, Protennoia is that awareness becoming audible. To understand Protennoia, it helps to remember that Gnostic systems are not describing a simple hierarchy of gods stacked on top of one another. They are describing layers of reality and consciousness. Each layer is not worse than the one above it, but more articulated, more expressed, and closer to the conditions where misunderstanding becomes possible. Protennoia occupies a crucial position in this structure. She is still fully divine. She still belongs to the Pleroma. But unlike Barbelo, who represents stable fullness, Protennoia represents movement, communication, and revelation. One of the most important texts associated with Protennoia is Trimorphic Protennoia, sometimes translated as three forms of first thought. This text is remarkable because it is written almost entirely in the first person. Protennoia speaks directly to the listener. She describes who she is, where she comes from, and what she does. She does not speak as a distant mythological figure. She speaks as a living voice. In this text, Protennoia describes herself as the first thought who dwells within the invisible spirit. She is the one who exists before all things and through whom all things are revealed. She is not created by the lower powers, and she is not subject to them. What makes this text especially important for understanding the feminine in Gnosticism is that Protennoia is explicitly portrayed as a revealer. She is the one who brings knowledge. She is the one who awakens. She is the one who enters lower realms not to rule them, but to call out to those who are trapped in forgetfulness. This is a major theme in Gnostic spirituality. The core problem is not sin in the moral sense. The core problem is ignorance. Souls forget their origin. They mistake the material world for the ultimate reality. They accept the authority of rulers who claim power they do not truly possess. Protennoia exists to interrupt that illusion. In Trimorphic Protennoia, she describes herself as appearing in different forms. She speaks as sound. She appears as light. She moves through different layers of reality, adapting her expression so that she can be perceived. This does not mean she changes her essence. It means she communicates at different levels of understanding. This is why the text is called trimorphic, meaning three-formed or three-manifested. The three forms are not separate beings. They are different modes of revelation. This idea is important because it shows how Gnostic thinkers understood divine compassion. Rather than demanding that souls rise up on their own, Protennoia descends. She meets beings where they are. She speaks in ways they can hear. She adapts without compromising her nature. This challenges the assumption that transcendence requires distance. In this worldview, transcendence includes the ability to enter lower conditions without being corrupted by them. Protennoia's descent is not a fall, it is a mission. In the text, she describes passing through the realms of the archons, the rulers who govern the material cosmos. These rulers are often portrayed as ignorant rather than purely evil. They believe they are supreme. They do not know what exists above them. Protennoia is not impressed by their authority. She speaks of moving past their gates, undoing their seals, and calling to the souls who are trapped under their rule. Her presence exposes the limits of their power. They cannot stop her because they did not create her. This reinforces a recurring Gnostic theme. True authority does not come from force or domination. It comes from origin. Protennoia carries authority because she comes from the highest fullness, not because she enforces obedience. Another striking aspect of Protennoia is her use of language. The text repeatedly emphasizes sound, voice, and speech. Protennoia is described as the voice that exists before language, the sound that precedes words. She is the call that awakens memory, rather than the argument that convinces the intellect. This reflects how Gnostic spirituality often emphasizes recognition over reasoning. Gnosis is not something you are talked into. It is something you remember when you hear the right call. Protennoia is that call. This also explains why she is so closely associated with the feminine in Gnostic thought. The feminine here is not passive or receptive only. It is communicative. It initiates contact. It carries the message of origin into places where it has been forgotten. In many later religious traditions, revelation is framed as law or command. In Gnosticism, revelation is often framed as reminder. Protennoia does not threaten. She does not condemn. She reminds. She tells the soul who it is and where it comes from. This has deep psychological resonance, even for modern listeners who do not accept the mythological framework literally. Many people experience moments in life where something breaks through the noise and reminds them of a deeper truth about themselves, a sense that there is more to reality than what is immediately visible, a recognition that feels familiar rather than new. Gnostic texts would describe that experience as the work of Protennoia. Another important point is that Protennoia is not opposed to Barbelo. She is not a lesser or rival figure. She is Barbelo's thought made audible. Where Barbelo represents fullness at rest, Protennoia represents fullness reaching outward. This distinction helps clarify the structure of the divine feminine in Gnosticism. The highest feminine principle is not a single static image. It includes both stillness and movement, wholeness and communication, silence and voice. Barbelo is the silence of fullness. Protennoia is the voice that comes from that silence. This layered understanding prevents simplistic interpretations. It shows that the feminine is not reduced to one role. It includes origin, mediation, revelation, and rescue. Protennoia also sets the stage for later feminine figures in the Gnostic hierarchy. When we later encounter Pronoia, forethought, and Sophia, wisdom, we will see similar themes of descent, care, and engagement with lower realms. But Protennoia remains unique because her descent is intentional and uncompromised. She does not act out of lack. She acts out of abundance. That difference matters. In many myths, descent is portrayed as dangerous or tragic. In Protennoia's story, descent is purposeful. It is the movement of compassion rather than curiosity. It is the expression of divine concern rather than divine error. This again highlights a key theme in Gnosticism. The highest reality is not indifferent to suffering. It responds, not by controlling the world, but by awakening those within it. For modern audiences, Protennoia can be understood as the principle of truth that cannot be silenced. The voice that continues to call even when systems of power claim total authority. The reminder that no matter how convincing an illusion becomes, it is not absolute. Protennoia is the interruption. She is the reason Gnostic texts often sound defiant. They insist that rulers are not ultimate. They insist that imposed identities are not final. They insist that remembering is possible. And notably, this insistence comes from a feminine figure. That alone distinguishes Gnosticism from many other ancient systems. The feminine is not merely associated with earth, fertility, or emotion. It is associated with mind, voice, and revelation. As we move forward in this series, this pattern will repeat. The feminine will appear again and again as the bearer of knowledge, the initiator of awakening, and the challenger of false authority. Protennoia is one of the clearest examples of this pattern. She speaks before commandments, she calls before laws, she awakens before judgment. She is not loud, she is persistent. And in Gnostic thought, persistence matters more than force. In the next episode, we will move further down the hierarchy to Pronoia, forethought. Pronoia represents the same divine concern, but expressed even more directly as rescue and guidance within the lower realms. If Protennoia is the voice that calls, Pronoia is the presence that stays. For now, remember this. In Gnosticism, the divine feminine does not remain silent. She speaks, she descends, she reminds, and that voice has a name, Protennoia. To continue with this series, click on the playlist on your screen. That playlist will take you through the feminine in Gnosticism in order, starting from the highest divine level and moving downward step by step. If this episode helped you understand these ideas more clearly, you can support the channel by liking the video. That helps this content reach people who are searching for deeper, historically grounded discussions of Gnosticism and the sacred feminine. And if you want more long-form videos like this, you are welcome to subscribe. New episodes in this series will continue exploring ancient Gnostic texts, feminine divine figures, and how these ideas shaped early spiritual thought. Thank you for listening.